First existentialist that we're going to talk about, his name is Soren Kierkegaard. Soren, Soren, mid 1800s, Christian existentialist. So it's important to realize that early existentialists are religious, later existentialists are atheists, and we're going to take a look at both. So Kierkegaard is religious, but the foundation of existentialism comes out of Kierkegaard, whether you're an atheist or a theist. And this is revolving around the concept of choices, which is why I had you write down one of the biggest decisions that you've ever made, because Kierkegaard believes that this is what provides meaning in life, our decisions. And we talked about that briefly yesterday, that we want to make decisions that impact other people. But Kierkegaard wants to look very specifically at very big decisions, like the one you wrote down, that have an impact on us. He calls them existential dilemmas, and they have 5 characteristics. The first characteristic of an existential dilemma is that it's going to change who we are. It's going to form who we are as a human being. So, for example, whether I get pepperoni pizza or cheese pizza is not the kind of thing that's really going to change my existence. But whether, let's say, my parents get divorced and I have to choose whether I live with my dad in Pennsylvania or my mom in Florida, I'm going to be a different human being based on that decision. So that would be an example of a choice that is going to be formative. Formative being meaning that it will form me. The second and third characteristic work together. The second characteristic is that I can think about this dilemma that I have, the choice that I have, over and over and over and over and over and over. But thinking isn't going to make the decision for me. I can't think my way to an answer. This is, unlike what a robot or a computer could do, which is just keep processing the information until one of two options occurs. I can process information over and over and over. Do I live with mom? Do I live with dad? Do I live with mom? Do I live with dad? And it never comes out clean in the wash. It's always muddled. So I had a decision where it'll seem trivial, but I told you guys I did not do well in high school, and I had to go to college that I didn't want to first semester to get my grades up. I did, and then got into Montana State University, which is where I really wanted to go, and Ithaca on the East Coast, which was my backup. And it turned out that when I was getting ready to go to Montana State, that they told me I was missing a vaccination that I needed to have. And I had to get it. Well, I went to my doctor, who was my cousin at the time, and he said, Matt, listen, this is not a vaccination that we like to give to adults. You should have had it when you were a baby. Don't know why you didn't. But it could have a side effect, a pretty significant side effect. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it was pretty significant. There was a risk of it if I got it as an adult. So he counseled against it. He contacted Montana to see if there was any way they would make an exception. They wouldn't. And I know all the information, let's say, at this point about Montana. I know all the information about Ithaca. I know about the risk of the vaccination. And am I going to, first, let's go back to the first one. Is it going to change who I am if I live in the East Coast versus the West Coast? Yeah. Not least just because I'm going to meet different people, but the whole attitude of living in the East Coast versus the Rocky Mountains is different. So it's going to form me. I can think it over, back and forth, over and over and over, and the decision's not going to be made. In the end, I'm going to have to take a blank, blank, blank. Any idea what that phrase is? I went in the wrong direction. Or did I go in the right direction for you guys? I'm going to have to take a blank, blank, blank. This is a Kierkegaardian phrase. It's one that is in our culture because it's become so popular, and it is a leap of faith. I'm going to have to jump. I'm going to have to gamble and hope that I make the right decision and that that decision forms me in the way that I want it to, and that it's the right decision, because there's no way to know. This is a big part of the human experience for Kierkegaard. So we lack certainty. We lack confidence in our ability to see the future and see our decisions and the outcomes of our decisions. So we have to take a leap of faith. Fourth characteristic, because of all of this, these are decisions that create anxiety to the extent that sometimes we use the word angst, which is sort of, well, existential anxiety. It's not just anxiety about whether I'm going to do well on my test or not. It's whether my life is going to turn out well or not. It's the kind of thing that keeps us up at night. So, because it's going to form who I am, thinking about it won't decide it. I'm going to have to take a leap of faith. It's going to create a good deal of anxiety for me. And if you guys picked a decision where it was probably an existential dilemma, you'll know that it had anxiety built into it. Fifth is sort of, I don't know, it's sort of positive, I think, in that these are moments that you're really aware that you're in control of your life, that destiny isn't set out in front of you, that you get to create it, that your decisions are going to create you. And some of you will have this feeling of aliveness. That's how I'll put it. The fifth characteristic, it gives us a feeling of aliveness and control. And some of you will experience that the first time that you're away from your parents for a period of time and recognize, oh my gosh, like, I'm an adult and I'm in control of my life. It is huge. So what I want to do is I want to segue immediately into the clip that follows, which is from Freaks and Geeks. My would be one recommendation, I should say, one of many recommendations for existential TV shows about coming of age in high school in American suburbia. The premise of the TV show, it was short lived but developed a cult following. It launched the careers of James Franco, Seth Rogen, and Jason Segel, and Linda Cardellini, who has sort of had a resurgence the last couple of years. And you're gonna watch the last 4 minutes of the whole show. Basic premise is this: the main character, Lindsay, is a smart student. She's a good student. She starts hanging out with stoners, Seth Rogen, James Franco, and Jason Segel, throughout the course of the show. And it messes with her relationship with her parent, messes up her relationship with her parents, and sort of goes off the track. And toward the end of the show, she gets an invitation to go to a math camp for high achieving students at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And so what you're going to see is her getting on the bus to go to math camp. She says to herself, I might as well just sort of try to, mend some bridges with my parents, redevelop that relationship with them, and, get back on track. At the same time, though, she is turning down an invitation from one of her stoner friends, Busy Phillips, who says, listen, come tour with the Grateful Dead with me and a couple of friends. Now, the Grateful Dead was a band up until the 80s or 90s. I forget when their lead singer, Jerry Garcia, died. And the Dead was sort of a cultural institution. And people who toured with the Dead would go from city to city, usually in a VW bus, using drugs, building hemp bracelets to support themselves, living the life of a true hippie, hanging out with the Grateful Dead. So they might not even go see the Grateful Dead perform. They're just going to go to RFK Stadium and camp in the parking lot for a week and do copious amounts of drugs and hang out and be hippies. So this is the Grateful Dead. Her friend says, come tour with us with the Grateful Dead. She says, no, I'm going to go to math camp. And what you're going to see is her getting on the bus to go to math camp. I love this scene. It's worth watching more than once because they capture her emotions and this sense of inner turmoil so well. And there's a question for you at the end, so to speak. I'm putting it out here right now. How do you feel about the scene as it works itself out. What's your gut reaction to it? It is clearly uh, an incredibly clear example. Sorry for the redundancy. Clearly clear. Um, it's a great example of an existential dilemma that she is having. And then just reflect to yourself. Do you think that the decision you wrote about to begin this was an existential dilemma? Have you had an existential dilemma? And tomorrow, what we'll do is we'll jump into what Kierkegaard thinks should happen during these existential dilemmas.